Okay, you're live.
All right, well then I will call the meeting to order. First, I have a message from the Attorney General about these types of meetings. We have in attendance today myself, the chairman, Jason Lorenz, we have Mark O'Neill, and we have Adam Roberts. Not attending today is Eugene Sutmiller, and hopefully Steve Newby will make it. All members of the public body participating remotely must identify themselves whenever they speak and must be clearly audible to the other members of the public body and to the public. Members of the public should be afforded remote access via live stream or other similar technology if possible, or a call-in number for listening by phone. And the chair should suspend discussion if the audio or video is interrupted, and I'm sure Adrian will let me know if that happens. All votes of the public body must be by roll call, and the public body should produce and maintain a recording of the open session of the meeting. Now, are there any member of the committee or member of the city staff that has any known conflict of interest with any item on the agenda today? I hear none. I need a motion to accept the agenda.
I'll make such a motion as Mark O'Neill.
Thank you, Mark. Is there a second? Adam? Thank you, Adam. All in favor?
Aye.
Next, I need a motion to accept the minutes. I assume you've had an opportunity to go over them.
Yes, I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Adam. And a second, Mark?
Yeah, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
All right. Next, first item of new business is a utilities department impact fee update by Mr. Provencio.
I'm sorry, Jason, can you take the acceptance by roll call, please?
Oh, sure. I'll go ahead and take the acceptance of the agenda and the minutes together. Mr. Roberts.
Here.
Yes or no, please.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
Thank you. And Mr. O'Neill.
Yes.
Is that good enough for you, Alma?
You have to vote too.
As long as you accept as well.
Yes, yes, I do. Thank you. All right, now, Mr. Provencio.
Okay, good afternoon, Chairman, Commission members. Jose Provencio, Deputy Director for Business Services for the Utilities Department. I'll present the wrap-up review of the last fiscal year's budget. And
Joe, I'm sorry, Joe.
Yeah.
The first item of the agenda is the impact fee update.
oh, I'm sorry, that's right. I got ahead of myself. The impact fee update. The work session was held this this Monday, where the council discussed the concept of the allocation. After a long deliberation, there was a recommendation to revisit this the whole policy making of the allocation for the water and wastewater impact fees, but did approve the recommendation by the utilities board for the increase in the water and wastewater development impact fees. And that concludes that segment of the update for today's meeting. If we can move to the next slide. Okay. Now we're at the presentation providing the summary for fiscal year 20 with respect to revenues for the water and wastewater development impact fees. For each one of the slides here, we present both the monthly revenues collected for each one of the components, the builder, developer, customer, and the rate base. This each slide for both water and for wastewater presents this level of activity in terms of scale throughout the year. If we could forward to the next slide, please. Slide number 3 presents the activity for wastewater, which is pretty much presents the magnitude of the revenues collected throughout the last fiscal year. If I could ask the slide to be forwarded to the next page. Slides 4 and 5 present the cumulative activity for the past several years in regard to revenues collected for the impact fees, both water and wastewater. Slide 4 presents the water activity, and thank you. And slide 5, if we can forward to the next slide, presents the activity of revenues, accumulated revenues for total year end for wastewater. The next slide, if we could forward to the next slide, presents the tabular data for water and wastewater as a means of comparison for fiscal year 19. And if we can forward to the next slide, presents the summary presentation for fiscal year 20. What we've added here is the target distributions for each of the, this is the line at the very bottom in red font, to answer any questions or provide a base reference as to how the impact fees are allocated between the builder, customer, and rate base, both for water and wastewater. If I can forward to the next slide. This is the this is a presentation for fiscal year 19 actuals and the actual and the budgeted fiscal year 20, and the recorded values and revenues and expenses for the development impact fees, and the budget for fiscal year 21. If we can forward to the next slide, please. Slide 9 presents the same information, but for wastewater development. And that pretty much presents the historical as well as the projected for fiscal year 21. And if we could move to the next slide, please. That ends the presentation. I'll stand by for any questions you may have.
I don't see any hands up from the members. I do have one question for you, Mr. Provencio. On
Yes.
slide number 7, so you had mentioned that City Council tabled the conversation about the allocation. And of course, these fees are paid in an allocated way right now. So this target line, is this actual or is this theoretical?
It is the designated allocation factors, even though it's titled target. The values that are denoted at the very bottom row are the existing allocation factors for water and wastewater, Chairman.
Okay, so it's not a calculation of what was actually collected, but it's what is required by ordinance right now.
That's correct.
Thank
Rather resolution, Chairman.
Resolution. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was the only question I have. Mr. O'Neill, do you have anything?
No, not at this time.
Mr. Roberts?
I don't have any.
No, I have no questions.
Great, thank you, Mr. Provencio.
You're welcome.
Next, we have Public Safety Fiscal Year 20 End of Year Financial Review by Liam Beasley.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Liam Beasley. I'm an accountant with the City of Las Cruces Finance section. And this first presentation will be the public safety impact fees for fiscal year 2020. Next slide. Here is the month-to-month revenues and expenditures during the course of the year. The average expenditure was about 80.3 thousand per month, and the average revenue was 53,000 per month. Next slide. This is the cumulative amount for the entire fiscal year. By the end of the year, the total revenue was at 645,000 and the total expenditures were 964,000. Next slide. This is a comparison of revenue, expenditures, and fund balance over the previous 6 fiscal years from fiscal year 15. And as you can see at the end of fiscal year 20, the fund balance remaining was 530,000. This is about a 38% decrease from where we were at last fiscal year. Next slide. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. And this is a comparison from month to month for the previous 6 years for public safety fees collected and then expended as well. In fiscal year 19, there was 1.3 million expenditures. This is about, and then fiscal year 20 was 964,000, like I mentioned. This is about a negative 25% drop. And then for the impact fees collected, fiscal year 20 was about the same as fiscal year 19. Next slide. And during the course of the year, the impact fees were spent on debt service for 2 debt instruments. There was the 2014 loan for a fire vehicle, and then the outstanding bond debt on the East Mesa Public Safety Complex. Next slide. And you should have been provided some tabular data that kind of makes up these graphs in the presentation. And if you're looking at that, you'll notice how October had negative transfers. And this is just simply an accounting correction to bring down in the monthly transfers down to 80.3 thousand per month. And the transfers out is what allows the impact fees to pay off the debt for what I just previously mentioned. Next slide. And then also when you're looking at the data, the fair market value column, all that means is it's the unrealized gains or losses from what the city holds as investments. And this is the particular amount that's allocated to the Public Safety Impact Fee Fund. And if there are any questions on the public safety impact fees, I can take those right now.
There was a table that you showed that isn't in my printout. Could you go back maybe about 4 or 5 slides that showed the fund balance in a yellow bar? There we go. Thank you. I just wanted to have another look at that one. I have no further questions. Mr. O'Neill?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. A couple are related. One question is not related to my first question, but last time we brought this up, there was a situation where you said the negative expenditure was because of transfers that allow public safety impact fees to pay off that debt. They were set up incorrectly. So are they, since then, are they being set up correctly now? Has that been corrected?
Yes, that was corrected earlier in the fiscal year. It was just.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, continue.
And I just wondered if it's all corrected now on these figures that we're getting now.
Yes, sir. Everything is correct. So it's just an accounting adjustment for to bring back in the monthly amount of transfers into that 80.3 thousand, which was budgeted at the beginning of the fiscal year.
Okay, so that was to bring down the transfer, but we shouldn't have that situation come up again? Or is that going to happen again? Okay.
No, we shouldn't. And so at the beginning of the fiscal year, we have a certain amount allocated to transfer to pay off that debt. And, at the end of the fiscal year, the appropriate amount was allocated. It was just the first few months were a bit different. And so that negative amount was just a correction to bring things back into line.
So is that something that could happen in the future? Is that like a one-time thing? Do
Theoretically,
we have to do that again?
No, it shouldn't happen again.
Okay. My other question is, as far as the public safety funds, can you detail a little bit of what some of those funds go towards? What exactly those public safety funds, so we have a little more detail as far as what that's spent on?
Right. So for the past few years, it's only been used to pay off debt service for certain loans and bonds. As I had mentioned, there was the East Mesa Public Safety Complex that was built recently. So some of the impact fees are going towards the principal and interest on those debt payments. And previously, there's been about 3 fire vehicles that there were loans taken out for, and those fees have been paying off those as well.
Another question I have, one of our past meetings, we had the fire department chief come up, and he had a safety fund related, or is that a separate fund just for the fire department? Because that was brought up at the meeting, and he didn't have any requests for the money, so therefore we didn't allot any, or we didn't recommend the allotment of any new funds for him. But is that a part of the same fund?
Commissioner, I believe, I don't recall exactly that conversation, but
I can help you with that, Mark. Yes, this is the fund, and there was on the calendar an opportunity to review and revise the public safety impact fee. And at that time, he didn't feel that it needed revision. So it wasn't really the removal or the absence of a fee. It was really the absence of a review of that fee at that time.
Okay.
Any other questions you've got, Mark?
I'm good for that right now.
All right, thank you. And if you could put your raised hand down. There you go. Thank you very much. Mr. Roberts, do you have anything for Liam on this?
No, I don't.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Beasley. If you would move on to the Parks and Rec financial review.
all right, so the park development impact fee financials, this is also for fiscal year 20. Next slide. Here's the month-to-month revenues and expenditures. The average revenue was about $127,000 per month, and the average expenditure was $4,000 per month. Next slide. For the whole year, the total revenues ended up being about 1.5 million, and the total expenditures at the end of the fiscal year were a little over 1 million. Next slide. On the 6-year comparison for revenues, expenditures, and fund balance, at the end of the year, the fund balance for park impact fees was at 4.7 million, and this is about a 12% increase from where we were at the end of fiscal year 19. Next slide. Here's the month-to-month and 6-year comparison for the actual impact fees collected and expended. Compared to fiscal year 19, the impact fees collected were about 5% up. And then compared to the previous year as well, the expenditures were about 33% over fiscal year 19. Next slide. And so in terms of what the impact fees were spent on over this past year, we had the East Mesa Outdoor Fitness Court, the Hadley Outdoor Fitness Court, the Calle Abuelo Neighborhood Park, reimbursement to developers for parks and trails developed in the Metro Verde subdivisions, and then the Provencio Van Dam field lighting project. Next slide. And again, just some points of note going over the tables that were provided. When you see 0 impact fees in September, there were actually 78,000 collected, but then 78,000 issued in refunds for fees that should have been waived for a subdivision. And so that's why those net to 0 during September. Next slide. And again, finally, the fair market value is just the unrealized gains and losses from the city's investments. And this is the amount that was allocated to the park impact fee fund. And then any questions on the park impact fees financials I can take right now.
I see Mr. Newby joined us. Thank you for coming in. I do have one question for you. Back on slide number 4. It seems the fund balance increases dramatically every year. And I know these funds have to be spent in a certain amount of time. I believe it's 7 years, or they are to be refunded to the fee payer. Are we in danger of that happening?
Chairman, yes, I believe it is 7 years as well. And I have a separate spreadsheet where I track the amount that gets carried over that we need to spend between each year. And as of right now, we're not in danger. I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head, but I can provide those.
I'm a bit concerned about that, so I would like to see that the next time we hear from you. You don't need to run out tomorrow and round them up, but I would like to see that. How about the committee? Does anybody have any questions? We'll start with Mr. O'Neill.
No, I don't, but I would like to see that as well, so we know where we stand.
Mr. Roberts.
No additional questions. That was my only concern.
And Mr. Newby.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, we've talked about this the last couple of meetings, and it does seem that the projects that Parks and Kathy has presented this, there's quite a backlog, but they seem to be making progress. So I'd say we all have the same concern that we don't lose the 7-year itch there.
Yeah, to see that fund balance increase the way it does in respect to the revenues, I'm concerned there. I'd like to see the accounting of that. That's all I have for you, Liam. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
And finally, my good friend, Mr. Larry Nichols, has a 2020 construction activity quarterly update.
Good afternoon, Chairman Lorenz, committee members, city staff, and public. Larry Nichols, Director of Community Development. I always look forward to these updates for the committee, particularly since the last 2 years we've been experiencing, I'll paraphrase it into one word, a very robust construction activity that adds to the capital improvement program and to the activities. Next slide. The Community Development Department, I've shown you this slide before, but I just want to re-emphasize that, we do work with the assistance of the public, the council, and the departments, and our committees, and our boards and commissions, particularly through the pandemic. The Community Development Department was declared essential operation. And we have for the last, I call it 10 months, because really the pandemic began to come surface back in December. So we have been on essential operation, similar to the fire department, the police department, the utility department, and those to maintain the activity that has been generated during this. Next slide, please. And this is the department structure that during the pandemic that we have been using to maintain our essential operations. You'll note that I mentioned that we were essential operation. We had 52 staff members. Those were permit techs, inspectors, planners, GIS, and neighborhood specialists. And in particular, under the neighborhood specialist is where all of the grant programming has been distributed and distributed to our agencies that we are in contract with. Community of Hope would be an example of those. But they all add to the activity within the city and to enable us to continue our daily lives. Next slide, please. So the word robust, and this slide indicates here the, sorry, I'm going back over to my slide so I can read it easier. The permit valuation during this year from year to date is at 164 million. That shows about a 9% increase over last year's activities. People often ask me, well, how is that possible? You know, they say that folks were having difficulty with investing and purchasing businesses and homes, but these figures don't reflect that. In fact, we're finding that our permits are up 7%. New homes during this period of time, year to date, we're at 415. We still have the last quarter to go. We've been averaging about 55 to 60 new certificates of occupancy per month for new single family dwellings. If we maintain that level of activity, we're going to find that we're going to be plus or minus 700 new homes for the year. That is the highest volume that we've had in the past 14 years. Whenever I see the figures of like 700 new homes or 650, I equate that if we just use a factor of 2 to 2.5 residents per home, I think it's probably more than that. But if we use that, that means we'd be adding about 14 to 1,500 new residents to the city of Las Cruces that need services. They need fire protection, police protection. They need utilities. They need parks. They need libraries. And of course, they need the retail businesses that support them as well. So all in all, when I say robust, I think all of these figures help support that terminology. In addition to the new homes, we had commercial buildings. We had 6 new commercial buildings during this time, another increase of 6%. Medical facilities. The Mountain View Hospital is completing their renovation. That was a $12 million project. The Three Crosses Regional Medical Center. We're issuing the certificate of occupancy for the hospital portion of that development this month. Next month will be the second portion of that development, which is called the Medical Office Building, MOB. They are going to be having 2 doctors occupy 5 of the spaces that are in that facility. And then there will be 3 others that will be available in short time, we hope, to be completed and become operational. And then under new business registrations, year to date, we're at 1,609. That's very, very similar to what it was last year. It's not quite the double digit or near double digit increase, but it's at about 2% where we were last year. Due to the pandemic, I would wager to guess we have had an increase in home occupancies under business registrations as compared to last year at the same time. Next slide, please. well, I didn't have that as my next slide. Okay, I'm fine with that. I can speak to this. The COVID pandemic influence on the construction activity. In early March, in the first announcements, it was shelter in place, and we saw a lot of closed businesses, not being able to maintain operations. But the governor's order and the public health order did not shut down construction, did not shut down. I'm getting some feedback for some reason. Are you still hearing me clearly?
We are. I'm sorry, Larry. I think that's Steve Newby. If you could mute when you're not using. Okay, you muted me. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Well, I was mentioning about the governor and the public health guidelines. That really impacted many folks, but it did not apply to construction, either in commercial or residential. And that enabled for all of us to go ahead and continue with operations. I'm going to have to go down here. I've got that slide further down in my presentation. So there we go. So in March, April, construction activity from 2019, we started with those 2 months, but then I went ahead and populated the rest of the months up to September. You can see on the slide here that from 2019 to 2020, 2020 being in the pandemic, we still, despite the pandemic, we still saw an increase in activity of 21%. In April, it lessened a little. People were adjusting to the pandemic, I believe, but still it was an increase over the 19 values. And then it continued down to June, and then June, it showed an increase of 28%, in July 21, August 39%. We had nearly, as an example, we had nearly 72 new home occupancies issued that month. And there again, folks are mentioning to me, well, how can this be? We're in a pandemic. Folks have had some of their revenues adjusted. But my thought on it, and maybe Chairman Lorenz, you can add to this, but the interest rate has enabled a number of folks to be able to qualify for home purchases. And they haven't had that capacity in recent times, but they have it. They seem to have it now. And then secondly, a number of the new home sales or purchases, I'm told, are from out of the city. They're from people coming from other parts of the United States to Las Cruces and the Southwest in general. Next slide, please. Now I'm back to where I thought I was earlier, so I'll go back up here. Under the development activity, there have been, during this period, there were 11 new subdivisions that were brought on. Primarily, they were in Legends West North, phase 3. I reported this last time, but that would still impact this report. Metro Central phase 1, and a multifamily apartment and commercial infill development. We have a couple of apartment complexes now going in the infill district. One of them is about a 52 unit complex. Another one that's coming up that's not quite in the infill, but still multifamily, is a 62 unit complex that's helping with the multifamily housing factor. We had 7 rezonings. We're finding that we had quite a few more rezonings this year. Last year it was as well. Folks are finding ways to rezone their properties so that they can develop them. And we've been really busy with the Planning and Zoning Commission with those, and City Council with those approvals. We had 3 projects on the infill district, primarily small scale commercial. And then we have the community blueprints, we call them, the Sarah Tract Development Blueprint is a 4.5 acre development that's in the central part of the city on Spruce Street. That is going to be a mixed housing development. It will have, I think it's 32 units. There's going to be 10 or 12 single family dwellings, a few townhouses, and a small apartment complex for the total of 32 mixed housing units. We have the El Paseo blueprint that's being re-energized, if you will. We have formed committees, and we have a new ad hoc committee to study that area to find ways of increasing the use and land use and activity for the El Paseo corridor. And then the East Lowman master plan is in its public presentation stage. This is a development that the utility department has been working on it very diligently and vigorously to remediate that site and for it to have a master plan. I think the master plan, the area that has been remediated and will be available for development in the initial stage is about, I believe it's about 72 acres, maybe a little more than that. The total site's larger than that, but the initial stage for the master plan, I have it here as 112 acres, I think, yeah. That is in about 50% complete for the master planning. We think that master plan will be completed about probably mid-spring or middle, around May or so, or middle of the year of this 2021. And then we've had recently brought about a new master plan. It's going to be known as the Metro Vista master plan. It's on the East Mesa. It's a 840 acre development. It has a private consultant who is developing that master plan. They've had 2 public outreach meetings, but it definitely will impact the activity to come in future years. It will also have an impact on demands for city infrastructure, water, sewer, wastewater, solid waste, fire, police, and all the services that come with a development of this nature. Next slide, please. We undertake trying to keep people informed about all of this activity. We do monthly, I produce a monthly construction activity report that is sent out to the home builders, the Chamber of Commerce, Association of Contractors, the real estate associations, design professionals, architects, engineers. And of course, we emphasize how it relates to the Las Cruces, Elevate Las Cruces comp plan. We make reports regularly to City Council, the Planning and Zoning Commission, Economic Development Policy Committee, and the Capital Improvement Advisory Committee, which is your committee, Mr. Chairman. Next slide, please. And then I'd like to end with giving the information. I think probably most folks know this, but I would just highlight it here, where the city associates and staff is welcoming our new city manager, Ifo Pali. Ifo has joined us. He started a week ago Monday. He's been coming in every day here at City Hall, and he is very easy to talk to. He's very accessible. I think we're going to find that he's going to help all of us to improve the city of Las Cruces. The photos you see there is the Community Development Department did this for Mr. Pillay, and when we met with him, we gave him the Elevate Las Cruces drink mug, but also the little statue you see there, the folks with their arms on each other's shoulders. I knew that Mr. Pillay had played professional football, and so I told him, I said, we're going to reflect back on those days, but have you be part of our team. And we'll huddle up to figure out how to develop the city. And so each one of those, it represented, he was one of the members of that circle there. And then it was community development, mission, vision, strategic business plan, and city customers. And I had a colored stone I put in front of each of those statuettes. And in the middle was a stone that I had fashioned that incorporated all those colors. And I labeled that one City of Las Cruces. So the thing I was bringing forward was we're going to work together as a team to develop our future. Next slide, please. And I guess that was it. I thought I had one other one, but I guess I'm not certain about that. So I think that's a good one to end with. And I stand for any questions the committee may have.
I'll give the input that you requested, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. O'Neill for his questions. But Larry, I think you're right on the money with your analysis for why home building is picking up in Las Cruces. At our home building company, we've noticed a dramatic increase in people moving to Las Cruces from large cities outside of the state, Chicago, New York, Los Angeles. I think there was a real exodus from some of those communities because they were so significantly impacted by COVID, and also so impacted by civil unrest, and the wide open spaces of New Mexico are a desire. Mr. O'Neill, I'll hand it to you.
Thank you. Well said. Well said. I like Mr. Beasley, this Mark O'Neill. I like your teamwork concept. I love that. And as he was a player and I was a coach, we can appreciate that. Also, it's nice to hear something not negatively impacted by the COVID is with your construction that's going on in the city. I wanted to ask you a question in regard to that. I know there was a lot of emphasis a while back before COVID about streamlining the process at City Hall with permits and zoning and business registrations. How is that going? Is that still going along smoothly? I imagine you're getting kind of bombarded, but how's it being handled and how's it moving along as far as that goes?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman, committee member O'Neill. The pandemic brought a lot of negativism, I guess you would say. I've been studying my staff, my associates, and there is and how that impacts the processes for permit issuance and inspection and reviews for subdivisions. There is a little morale suffering because of the pandemic. What brings that on? The newscasts that we see, the headlines we read, the change schedules for people, the revenues being impacted. And that kind of correlates to what I've learned is called anticipatory grief. And I thought, well, what does that mean? And what it means is the anticipatory grief is that one may think that there's something negative or bad going to happen. They can't quite put their finger on it, but they anticipate it's going to happen. So, those things we're factoring in. I guess we were, I guess we're going to call it fortunate, but I also maybe think about what you said. Well, Larry, you mentioned that you're going to work on process improvement, program improvement. And we started that committee, Mark, we started that just prior to the pandemic. And so what have we done? I have not been able to bring on any additional staff. We're going to do that now. We're going to be advertising for it. But what we've done is this. We developed what we call the interactive video inspection process for inspections. We are doing about 75% of those now. We are doing inspections on same day of request in many cases. And if not, then within the next day, at the latest, the day after. We are not behind on inspections right now. We are not behind on plan review. We are not behind on issuing certificates of occupancies for completed projects. And we are current with our cases that we have bring to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So in spite of the pandemic, and maybe as a result of the pandemic, we have found innovation and other means and methods of being able to keep up with our workload. And the way we've done that, and I want to send out an appreciation to the Home Builders Association and the General Contractors Association. We recently brought forward a initiative to increase the commercial, last year the residential fees, permit fees, and then recently the commercial and trade fees. And the reason for doing that is I told everyone, this is going to enable us to improve our resources. We'll be looking for newer technology. We'll be looking for ways of shortening process for permitting and for inspection and other processes in the city. I use this formula, and I've spoken to the city council and to the city manager. I have a kind of an architectural and engineering formal education, so this is a formula. I call it W sub L, which stands for workload, plus R sub A, which stands for resources available, equals CL, your customer service level, CS sub L, customer service level. So if your workload is up, Mark, but your resources are the same, your customer service level is going to be compromised. And that's what we were seeing for a few years here. But over the last 2 years, I'll say, we've been able to adjust to the workload through acquiring additional resources to enable us to have a higher level of customer service. That's my mantra. That's what I'm working for the developers and the contractors, along with our strategic business plan. So I guess that was kind of a long explanation for you, but I can just tell you that even with the pandemic, and then the additional increases in activity, we have been able to maintain our customer service level on process and inspection and permitting.
Great. I appreciate the detailed answer. I commend you and your staff for keeping up with that. I was just concerned about any kind of backlog of all that, like with the increased activity and the COVID. So it sounds like we're okay. So
well, we're
reflects on you.
Yeah, I like to say that I just finished a discussion with the State Construction Industries Division. I think we're the most innovative building department in the state. And I had discussion with them recently, and I presented some of the programs that we're using here. And the director of the Construction Industry Division said, you know what, Larry, we're going to use your City of Las Cruces as a prototype for the state on some of your techniques that you're using to address inspection and permitting. So felt pretty good about that.
Fantastic. Glad to hear it. I have one more question. I wondered how the impact of the withdrawal from the TID, if that affect your department, your construction or funding, or how, does that play a part at all in with you guys? The TID fell apart.
Mr. Chairman and Mark, we that transaction, the developer withdrew his application for the TID, but I don't think it completely stopped that. I think the conversations are being renewed. I don't know at what status they are, but I don't think it was an activity that will stop that project. It may have a different form, it may have a different structure, but I think it's going to be brought forward.
What percentage will your department be involved? Mark O'Neill again. How will your department be involved with that? Like percentage wise, or will you still be overseeing a lot of that?
Well, Mr. Chairman, this is Larry. Yes, sir, we will. From this standpoint, we did do on that parcel of land, we did what we call the Apodaca blueprint. It had the kind of the design that land use design that we had hoped that a developer would achieve. I think those are going to be utilized. They will have their own master planning, but I think they're going to take several of those features. And when they come in to do that development, they will present their master plan to community development and then on to planning and zoning and then to the city council for approval. So yes, this our department will be involved initially with the subdivision and the master plan design. It's theirs, but we'll be reviewing it. And then it will, when it comes time for permitting, the various projects will be involved in the permitting and then the follow-up inspections.
Very good. Thank you for what you do and for your presentation. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, we thank the Community Development Department, appreciates and thanks the Capital Improvement Advisory Committee for the support that you give us.
Thank you, Mark. Mr. Roberts, any questions for Mr. Nichols?
No, nothing from me. Very informative.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. And now Mr. Newby, any questions? You're muted, Mr. Newby. Sorry.
One of those technical days. Larry always speaks very well about the advances in his department, but I always think comparisons really tell the tale. Here in Doñana County, we have 3 permit granting authorities: the city, the county, and construction industries. And I work with all 3 of them. I am thrilled to hear that construction industries is going to follow your lead, Larry. I've had a call into the chief building official now for 3 weeks with no return call. The county, I've had a project in for 7 weeks. They have not unrolled the plans yet. And so when you look at what the city has done under Larry's leadership and their ability under extraordinary conditions to not just run circles around the other 2, but to come up with new ways to do things that will serve them well into the future. So my thank you, Larry. Wouldn't expect anything different from you, but when you're dealing with all 3 permit entities, it's nice to have at least one that continues to shine. So for me and fellow architects, thank you so much.
This is Jason, the chair. Yes, Steve, I absolutely agree. We haven't seen inspections as timely or certificates of occupancy as timely ever as we are right now. So I appreciate the job that you and your staff are doing. Well done. Thank you. If that's it for the questions, I'm sorry, Larry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, we're all doing this as a team. As that little statuette showed, you hear the words a lot these days. Well, we're all in this together. Well, even before this, our current condition, we were in it together. And I just, after I do my monthly report on construction activity, and highlight some of those percentages in all that I presented today, my final comment to the city council and the city manager's office is roll on, Las Cruces, roll on.
Thank you, Larry. Next on the agenda is public participation. I don't know if we had any questions. Alma, do you know?
Alma Ruiz, Senior Office Manager for the record. No, we did not have any submissions.
Shocking. Great. Next, we have a couple of action items. Thank you, Alma. We need a member to write our annual report. Historically, it's been the vice chair. But we haven't issued a report in a couple of years, and I think it's time that we do. Do we have a committee member that would like to volunteer to put pen to paper for us? Guys are awfully quiet. You're gonna make me do it, aren't you? They don't even take their.
This is Steve, never having
Yes.
written that report. If you would volunteer to be lead, I would be happy to help you scribe a scintillating report.
Fantastic. Thank you, Steve.
In other
I
words,
would be happy to work with
I'll
you.
design the cover and then you do everything else.
Thank you very much. Alma, you have something?
I do have a question, and whoever volunteered, now that I know it's Steve Newby, I'll go ahead and send the past report. So he has a reference, a couple years past reports, just so he has a reference as to what we've done in the past.
Thank you, Alma.
Let the record reflect, I volunteered to help the chair as, #1 assistant.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Next, we need to open up nominations for the chair and vice chair moving forward. I'm not sure when that would go into effect. I assume the next meeting, but we haven't done this in a little while.
Jason,
like to-
first, do we have to take action on that other item about, you have that under action items. Do we need to make a motion for that?
I don't think we need to vote, do we, Alma?
Alma Ruiz, Senior Office Manager for the record. No, as long as there was a volunteer, that's the action.
Great.
Okay,
And that
Thank
everybody was in agreement.
all right. I agree.
Well, since you've got your mic hot, Mark, would you like to nominate anybody for chair and vice chair?
I'd like to nominate you, Mr. Lorenz, for our chair of our board.
How about vice chair?
Well, we
I would
just,
like Steve Newby, I would like to volunteer Mark O'Neill as vice chair.
We do get voluntold around here, don't we? How about Mr. Roberts? Would you like to make a nomination?
Both of those sound great to me.
All right, well, in my other committees and boards, normally whoever doesn't attend the meeting tends to get the seat. And without Eugene Sutmiller here, I thought he might get a nomination. But since he didn't, I guess we'll go ahead and put it to vote. We have one nomination for chair, and that's myself, Jason Lorenz, one nomination for vice chair, and that is Mark O'Neill. Do I hear a motion? Or were nominations enough? Steve,
To be so made. Second.
I'll second.
okay, and we'll do this by roll call. Mark O'Neill, yay or nay?
Okay with me, yes.
Steve Newby. You toggled backwards. There you go.
Yes.
Thank you. And Adam Roberts.
Yes.
And I also agree, I guess. That's the last of the action items we have. Next up on the agenda is board comments. I'll open that up to Mark first. Do you have anything for us?
Yes, I do. Uh-oh, I lost the feed somehow.
We can hear you fine.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yes, first I'd like to thank Alma for helping get me set up on the Zoom, and it made it real easy for me, her and her staff, I should say. So thank you very much for that. I'd like to also maybe have something put on the agenda. I was going to bring it up during public safety, but it's really a new item and it might require action. And that would be to make a recommendation. I guess this board can make a recommendation on funding or resolution as far as a project that I feel strong about, and what it is about is for the fire department now has a mobile unit, and it's run by one of the firemen, a medic, I believe, Mr. Paul Ford. And it's a great thing because it takes some of the pressure off the police department and the fire department that should be fighting fires and doing that. And what his mobile unit does is go out when there's a problem with the senior citizen, has an accident, homeless, mental health issues, ODs, drugs, things that do not require weapons, that do not require the police necessarily, but maybe a domestic dispute that doesn't require weapons. And I like to look into that, and I'd like to have someone come, the fire chief and this Mr. Ford, to explain what he does, because I think we might be able to steer some funding or at least make a recommendation as such, because he needs help. We need another person that does what he does, maybe another unit, another vehicle. And being that they have that reserve in the fire department and then for the public safety funds, I'd like to see us expand upon that. Maybe have one coming from the police department or one from the fire, or both from the fire department. Anyway, we can ask them questions to see. I know council person Gandara was very interested in something like this to take some of the pressure off the police department on issues where they don't really require policemen, and they can always call the police in if they need help. But there's so many issues that can be handled this way. So I was seeing what the committee thinks about that, maybe putting it on the next meeting's agenda. Doesn't necessarily have to be next month, but sooner the better, I guess.
Understood. Thank you, Mark. Mr. Roberts, do you have any board comments?
No, just want to thank Alma and her staff putting all of this together, putting these packets together, and thank you to all the presenters.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Mr. Newby.
Same here. Alma, thank you so much for your patience. Also having the agendas delivered, I think is great. If y'all could just include like a 6-pack of beer with those deliveries, meetings would probably go much quicker.
Thank you, Mr. Newby. Next item on the agenda is next meeting is scheduled for October 15th. The agenda looks pretty light. I don't anticipate a lot happening between now and then. I'm inclined to cancel that meeting if I don't have any objections.
No objection.
I'm good.
I think we'll probably want to meet in November and probably skip December, but I think skipping October is going to make a lot of sense. Hopefully by the time we get together in November, things are a little less weird. They probably won't be, but I hope that they are. All right, well, that brings us to the end of the agenda. I call it adjourned. Thank you all very much, and a very special thanks to Alma and her staff. They make this so much easier on us.
Excuse me, Jason,
Yes.
can we get that item on the November meeting? And maybe we can get the appropriate people contacted?
I can certainly make sure we reach out to the appropriate people and check on our scope and their availability.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Appreciate that.
All right. Thank you, guys.
All right.
Thank you.